But I think we're also, as an organization, really trying to focus on community schools because delegates of CTA family, we deserve more than just to survive. We deserve more than just to survive. Our students deserve more than just to survive. Another world is possible. So while we're focused on the now, on the moment of getting through this crisis, this pandemic, by the way, that was caused by some of the same disinvestment, not only in education, but education and healthcare and our students and the lives of our students for decades and generations that has led us to this. And so while we got to get through this, we also have to have another focus on not just surviving, but on the real world that we deserve. And so community schools are an antidote to a system that puts our needs last and the needs of our students last. Community schools, and Joe Boyd laid this out as well in the context of this kind of racist backlash that's going across the entire nation. Like 30 some odd states have now banned the teaching of curriculum that deals at all with race. And in this context, community schools are antidote because they allow us to have a curriculum that's based on the needs of our students and the needs of their history, their true history. And then when democracy is under attack, as Joe laid out, community schools are an antidote in that they put democratic decision making in our hands and in the hands in coalition with the parents and families and students we serve. But none of this is easy, and I don't want to create a panacea. In fact, it's very often, that's one of our biggest challenges around community schools. I've been to many places across the state, and they say they have community schools. I've even been to school sites which they call community schools, and I'll ask the educators there, so what is your involvement with the community schools? They say, oh, I know nothing about it. It's something the principal does. Or I know nothing about it. It's something we farmed out to a nonprofit like the United Way or something like that. That is not community schools. And the model we are fighting for, in fact, it would be scandalous to see in the beginning of this pandemic, there was some money that went out to districts who said they had community schools. And if I read you the list of districts, you would be awestruck. Many of them are your own districts where they got $3 million to run their community schools, and almost none of them have impacted our lives. Almost none of us know anything about what's going on. And so the model that we're doing is a real bottom-up model, where it's democratic decision making, where it's co-run. The schools are co-run by us in coalition with the parents and students and educators and the district. And that is a hard model. That takes a lot of power. And that's why this is connected, not abstract from our organizing plan, but it's at the heart of our organizing plan as well, because it's the same power of organizing our own members. It's the same power of really connecting with the community that we have to do to win the most basic contract fights, right? To win anything. So this is a process that we're going upon, that we've been going on through a year. We have 20 locals who have been part of this. We're now really trying to expand it. California has an unprecedented amount of money that we've invested in California, nearly $3 billion. It's the single biggest investment in the history of this nation in community schools. And it is a chance to get this right, or without us, if we're not engaged with this, it's going to be the same old top-down bureaucratic decision-making, and we're going to be, we just lost this opportunity. And so we wanted to raise the consciousness of you all and answer questions to you by doing two things. First, we want to show you a short video that goes over some models. Then we're going to hear from Ingrid, who is actually a community schools coordinator at a school site, when you can see what it looks like on the ground, what that democratic decision-making in coalition with others looks like. And then we're going to go to both Grant and Kampala, two other leaders in locals that are really focusing on building the power to actually either demand this of the district or in concert with the district, or take back from the district models of community schools that are not working and really put a democratic bottom-up model. So let's roll the video, and then we're going to have a panel, 3 people, and then we're going to open up to questions for you all.
We know that it is through actually mining the assets of our communities, all of us coming together, understanding it's our shared responsibility, providing services and supports from all of those systems, from housing to food, to mental health services, to healthcare. All of those services we know our students need so they can learn. That's what they're doing here.
The community schools model is vitally important. It is, in fact, the model that we've been so desperately waiting for in public education, because it puts schools in their rightful place at the center of the community. Our parents, our community, our educators have been crying out for a model that really takes into account all of what our students need and our educators need. Our students need resources. Our parents need resources. And our educators need to be at the center of the decision-making process around not just resources, but also about the curriculum we use, the way our schools function.
CTA is creating a network of support for local associations in California's Community School Initiative. There are 20 CTA locals taking part in the NEA Strategic Campaign on Community Schools, with most receiving NEA Community Advocacy and Partnership Engagement grants to support their organizing efforts.
The community schools model is really about bringing local control back to our schools and ensuring that students and parents and the community who are impacted by the school have a say in what's going on, and also that the resources that our students and our parents and our community members have, the assets, the brilliance, the knowledge that they can bring to the school community is leveraged, right? And is leveraged for the benefit of the entire school community.
Community schools have been able to really bring student supports and family supports that allowed for students to stress less on food and income and rent by being able to create wraparound services for those students and families.
The community school model is critical to the work of supporting our immigrant and low-income families. So we have to do a lot of outreach, a lot of talking, a lot of listening, a lot of being visible. You have to be out there, out in front of the school, talking to people every day, letting them see your face, letting them know that you're there for them. Building that trust in those relationships is really crucial to that.
We've taken the time as leaders to go out into the community and build some relationships with community groups, with parent groups, and then bring them all together. Our union office now, for the first time that I've seen ever, has regular meetings with parents, with students, community members, teachers, all together discussing the issues that are important to them and how we can find solutions.
The community school model really gets the parents to have an authentic voice in the education. The parent, the important work we're doing as parents and giving, bringing those assets to the school, and the school helping us in terms of needs if we have any, but also the assets that we bring enriching the school.
Families want and students want curriculum that actually builds on community and cultural assets. That is very unique to every school site. Students and families want lower class sizes, because when you have smaller class sizes, then educators can spend more undivided time with each student, right? Students feel a level of comfort when there aren't an overwhelming number of students in a classroom.
I would absolutely encourage other cities, other school districts around the country to embrace the community schools model, because truly we know that each and every community is different. Each and every community has different needs and also different assets and resources. And for schools to really be able to impact students and parents and families in the ways that we know that they can and they should, they need to first be including those students and parents and families and educators in the school community, in leadership, in decision making, and in deciding how schools are run.
As a parent, I'm invested, and as a community, we're invested. We want our kids to be successful, and so he's engaged in school. He does well. His friends, they're all building off of that same energy of us all being involved and invested.
All of our students, regardless of where they live, especially those of color, our BIPOC students, and the ones in lower socioeconomics, have what they need to be successful, because that is the way that we can, as educators, help lift them out of their situations.
Thank you. And I want to say sorry to the interpreter. We have that video on cta.org with captions. and we should have played that today. I also want to say sorry to our delegate. We're learning to give people the most access, and I'm sorry we didn't do that this time, but it is on our website, cta.org. It does have it with captions, and we could put this as well in our link here so that make this accessible to all our delegates. Apologies. It's first up on the landing page actually is the one with captions. So that's powerful stuff. And you can see all the folks on that video have been involved with this work for a while. So I want to now go to Ingrid Vieda, who's a teacher and now is in the role of community schools coordinator, a longtime actually state council member as well, who's going to talk to us about the day-to-day work around really building that power at school sites and what it looks like. Take it away, Ingrid.
Thank you. Good morning, Council. So nice to be back with you all. I just wanted to share a little bit about what community schools actually looks like in our schools. For us at 93rd Street Elementary, our journey began with putting together a community school implementation team of 22. This includes educators, administrators, parents. We designed a needs and asset assessment, which we asked the stakeholders what they wanted to see in our school. And one of those stakeholders groups were our students. And so the number one concern that our students had was recess, along with the bells. They told us that there were a lot of bells at school. The bells were very confusing, and they wanted to restructure recess because they were clear about telling us that recess didn't work for them. How we responded, right? The pandemic came and we were teaching virtually for a long time, but as we returned to school, we kept our promise. We now have a recess coach. The students are allowed to choose their areas. But one of the most important changes that we've implemented, according to what the stakeholders asked for, we've eliminated all of the bell system at our school. And so we no longer ring bells. This was also a way of addressing the school to prison pipeline. And we now have a quiet campus. Whenever we present on this, people ask us, how does it work? It just does. So school begins at 8 o'clock. Our teachers are out at 8 o'clock to pick up their students. Each recess, everyone knows when recess begins for their group. Students have a system of lining up. We have a flag that goes out and the students see the flag and silently line up. We don't do whistle play and we don't have a bell system, and our students are loving it. And so that is one small change that makes a big impact in our school. We've also heard from the community, and the community really, really appreciates the fact that we don't have bells ringing throughout the day. So that's one of the small things. The other thing that we've done at 93rd is we've listened to parent stakeholder groups. Because of the pandemic, our parents needed a lot of help and assistance. We continue to provide nourishment to all of our families. We distribute to over 200 families every 2 weeks, clothing, masks, and food. We found a local distributor in our community that was willing to help, and we've all connected the pieces so that the food comes to the school site, and from the school site, it gets distributed to the families. It's a lot of coordination with the community, but our parents really appreciate the support and the fact that it's at school and they don't have to go to another agency to receive that service. Was there, I don't know, David, if you want me to go through other.
Yeah, well, why don't we, I think that's a good way to start out. And then why don't we go now to a couple of our locals who are actually, because I know in your case, it's been like a 3 or 4 year process, right? And while changing bells doesn't seem like maybe the most radical thing, the process by actually creating that space to actually make those decisions and not just have a principal or a district veto it, actually took power. And so we're now going to go to a couple locals that are actually trying to build that same process. And then what we'll do, folks, is we'll have time for you all to ask us questions, ask questions of the panelists at the end of this. Thank you, Ingrid. Let me now go to Grant Schuster, who's up next, who's from Anaheim, and share his experience about the process that he's in right now, and they're in his local.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. The situation we were in Anaheim is that we had a district and administration that supported the idea of community schools and actually implemented 2 community schools with their own vision, but it was top down. They determined what they thought the community needed and then delivered those services to the students and their families, which is not a negative thing. It's a great belief to go out there and believe that schools should be doing that, but it didn't involve the community or the teachers in the process. So we went to the district and asked to be a partner, went directly to board meetings and started talking about having this partnership, and then sat down and started the education process. And that's really important to start with your leadership, you as a president or an executive board member, to have an understanding of community schools and what you can do to be part of the process within your local, and then move forward. We educated our site reps. We took time to identify community groups. I looked at community groups that we had in Anaheim and which ones our members were actually participating in outside of our union local, and started going to those meetings and just listening and letting folks know that we were there and we wanted to be part of this new process, and brought 3 of them on board with our steering committee as we move forward. Also identifying parents who would want to be part of this, and then starting the steering committee. This is really important because the grants that are going to be provided by the state actually are going to have a requirement of shared decision-making with a steering committee that is made up. And our local Anaheim steering committee has 3 community members, 3 teachers, 3 parents. It has the community school coordinators who in our district are members of our sister union, CSEA. And so we meet on a monthly basis to talk about the pillars and how we can provide not just wraparound services, but what is the model going to be for having input on professional development and teacher support and academic programs for students? How do parents and students give input to that? After several months of that group meeting, we developed our site teams, and our site teams, again, students, parents, community groups, district staff members, but it's chaired and the agendas are created by a teacher, an ASTA member, and a CSEA representative. Site administration can attend the meetings and give input, but they do not run them. They're not in charge. This is a from the ground up creation that we wanted to make sure everyone felt they were a part of and had a say in creating the program and not just voting on what other people are presenting. So we've done that over the past year, and now we are putting those in place. And again, the education piece continues. We've had meetings with several sites where we go out and present what this is to the teachers, separately the parents. We've gone out to a principals meeting with the district and presented to all of the principals to help them understand what it is exactly that we're proposing and how they're a part of it, but how this is a grassroots effort of building a coalition that will not just strengthen individual schools, but public education in general. 2 important things just to mention very quickly. The activities we're involved in most now are grant writing together to the state that's helping us build these relationships with the groups, and also the needs and asset assessment. It's really important that our parents go out and talk to other parents, our students talk to other students, teachers do the same, and come up with each individual site what they need. So I'm going to stop there and hand it off to David again to bring Kampala in.
Thank you, Grant. As you can see, Grant laid out the day-to-day work. This is not, a lot of our administrators are going to look for a turnkey program that deals only specifically with wraparound services and none of the stuff that Grant has laid out. You can see it's taken a multi-month long focus with his own members first, and then reaching out to the community. Some of the pillars that Grant, all the pillars that Grant laid out about what community schools entail are also on our website, which is another great resource around this. And an antidote to our principals just saying this is only about wraparound services. This is about much more than that. It's about curricular issues, about democratic decision making. Let me now go to Kampala Tays Rancifer, who's a member leader in Oakland and who's going to lay out the process that she's been at the real middle of over the last months and years.
Greetings, State Council. I'm really grateful to be here with you all this morning, and I'm really humbled to have this opportunity to really share with you all the work that we're doing in Oakland. OUSD is unique in that half of our schools are community schools. In fact, we're considered a community school district. The challenge is that OEA and the larger community really hadn't been engaged in the development of the community schools vision. That was almost entirely done by the district. So there has been historically very little engagement of our stakeholders. But we knew that when community schools was done right, that we have this opportunity to really change what public education looks like in our communities. So what we did was we really began to engage our families, students, and educators to see what did they want to see in school? What is their ideal community school? And this really began our process of redefining and re-envisioning our pillars for community schools. We have 8 pillars. We're in Oakland. We do a little bit extra. That's what we do. And what we heard lifted up over and over again by students, families, and educators of color is that there is systemic, structural, and institutionalized racism, and that our Black families, they felt that that anti-Black racism was really showing up over and over and over again in our district, and that there were generations of harm done, and that there was is a legacy of really disinvestment in those schools. And so as a result of hearing this feedback from families, we really had to pull out a pillar of equitable schools. So we made that a pillar on its own so that we could really try to demonstrate to our families that this is, that we will be addressing the most marginalized students in our district. Our community was reshaping what community schools should be, but we didn't possess enough power to really realize this new vision. So what we did was we turned to the upcoming school board elections. The families and the educators and the students really came together, and we won 3 out of 4 of our board seats. And every time I talk about this, I have to really lift Van Cedric Williams, who is our OEA school board member and also NEA District 2 director. Having folks on the board our own folks on the board is really a powerful tool. He became our board champion. He, together with the families and the educators and the students, really helped us win the reparations for Black students in Oakland. And this is our vision of community schools that's really targeted at Black students. And I would love to go into all of what we won, but I don't have that kind of time. I wish I did. But since the passage of this like landmark resolution, we created a task force. And you heard what Grant was saying before, is like this joint committee of community and district folks that created a steering committee really responsible for the implementation of this work. And so far, what we've done is we've created this plan. We have indicators that is going to help really guide how we can tell whether we're successful. And we have a plan for our a Black Thriving Fund. What we believe the core of a community school is community. That was what was missing, right? Therefore, we've really taken the approach from the beginning to stay engaged with the people that are being impacted, our students, our families, right? From October through December, we developed a door knocking plan where we went and we heard from families and students to ensure what we were working on is still accurate. And that work was done by OEA and our community partners. But in February, during Black History Month, we have a roadshow planned where what we're planning to do is take what we've developed from the task force to school sites for even more additional educator feedback. What was said is that every school site is different. And the last thing we want to do is create something where educators roll their eyes because, they're not going to do it if it's not something that works for them. So we really want to make sure that this is significant input from all of the stakeholders. This is our vision for shared governance. The shared governance pillar of the community schools model goes beyond just simply getting input, but having students and families and educators at the table designing what schools should look like. So I want to encourage other locals to really embrace this community schools model. It really allows us to identify the needs of our communities and allows us to take all the stakeholders to come together to find the best ways to address those needs. So thank you, and that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Thank you for really laying out how this community schools, a struggle around this, actually connected directly to political power as well. And through on the ground, grassroots knocking on doors of parents and families. Really appreciate that. Let me bring all the panelists up here, if you can get back on the screen. And as they do that, I want to say a couple things. We're going to have a few minutes for questions and answers. And I know a lot of times when people hear folks speak on this, they feel like that is just so disconnected from our reality. And I want to really tell you that none of this happened overnight. These folks, each of them have been involved with this, some of them from 3 to 4 to 5 years, right? Sometimes it takes a strike to win this. It took a motion, then it took a strike, then it's really organizing, making sure the members are really willing to fight around it, bringing it into our bargaining, right? Then it took getting funding for it, and now we have funding. And so I really want to tell people that if you hear this here and it feels overwhelming or disconnected from your reality, that's okay. There are little baby steps in each one of these parts. The other thing is we have an institute that's through NEA that 20 of our locals from across the state, and there's 40 nationally, have been part of really getting coaching around this. We hope to open this up to more people. I guess and to be honest with you, we've had some locals who started off in that and actually dropped out because they didn't have the capacity at this point to do that. Because the two things we're really looking for, people are really deeply committed to organizing their own members around this and have a deep orientation to working with the community and building power together. And that's something that we want to put on your radar. Again, this money is coming very quickly in February. The regs come out in March. Some of this money comes out. We just don't ever want our members to be acted upon or have this done to us. We have to be the drivers of this. So let me go to questions and see. We have a few minutes, and then I'll give you one last thing at the end for next step too. So who do we have a question from? Okay, so one question is, how do these processes dovetail with established school site councils and other stakeholder groups? Anyone want to take that one on? Ingrid, go ahead.
So the community school implementation team has a different job, right, than your SSC. You have your student site council team to decide certain budgets. You have, for example, in Los Angeles, with our contract, we also have a leadership council that decides on other school budgets, school calendar, master calendar, and school bell system. The implementation team is really there to think up how to, look at data that's gathered, present analysis, right? And then propose implementation. But we really don't make decisions until we're all together. And so the faculty gets to make their voice heard. Our non-teacher staff gets to also say what they believe is their priority and their needs, and also our parents and also our students. And then together we implement everything. It takes time to figure out how each council works with the implementation team, but it's possible.
Great. I have a couple other questions. Jessica Downs asked, will these testimonials be put on our website? Yes, I think we can, and I think, see, it's being recorded, but I just also want to put this out there, cta.org/community schools. We have a bunch of resources there, including model district language for motions at districts, model stuff we could put forth around bargaining around getting some of this stuff, this democratic decision making MOUs. So there's a bunch of stuff there. And I think you also will find some other testimonials. And I think it's the first up on the landing page. The other thing is how much funding has the state put aside for community schools? So it's about $2.8 billion. And this relates to the one thing I want to put on before I go to the next question. Each president in this state of California, in one of our locals, received 2 emails from Toby. I think they received the first one January 5th or 6th, then another this last week, inviting them to the 19th from 4 to 6. We're going to have a whole briefing for presidents on community schools, where we'll have a kind of abridged talk like folks here, talking about what it looks like on the ground, because we don't want to take for granted that our presidents have experienced it either. But we're also going to go through the nuts and bolts. We're going to have our GR folks go for the nuts and bolts of the grant process. And we're going to find many of our folks are going to be way ahead of our districts knowing this information. So the 19th from 4 to 6, we really want presidents there because we believe the real way that we move this is through the power of our union, right? And so one great thing you all do is coming to council as you kind of are responsible for taking back the message to you, the people you represent. If you could reach out to your presidents and put that on their radar, the 19th from 4 to 6, look for an email from Toby inviting them. We'll probably put a link here in the chat as well. But our real target audience, not that everyone doesn't have a role, is really getting the presidents convinced and on board with this as well. It looks like we have a question from Jeanette. Do you have an example for more rural schools? Connecting with families, including knocking on doors, is a struggle. I have some feedback, but let me see if there's anyone on the panel has that at all. If not, I could share something as well. Okay, let me take a shot at that, Jeanette. We have met the folks, probably the biggest developed and most developed statewide community schools model actually comes from New Mexico, where they have a lot of rural schools. We've met with the leadership there. The leadership there they're now 3 or 4 years into this, have talked about some of the very specific and different ways they're doing this. This money absolutely does go to rural schools. In fact, you'll find a renewed focus on that. There's a understanding of the different dynamics around rural schools in the state. And you're going to find in Sacramento, both the CDEs, California Department of Education, and the state board are definitely really looking for models around rural schools. So if that pertains to you, we'd love to connect you. There's also some articles that we see, and I'm not sure this is on our website, really talking about the specific power of community schools in rural schools and the specific way it connects with families and communities and educators in that context. So it's something we frankly need to develop more, but it's something that if you're a rural school and you want to be part of this, we'd love to get you support around this. As I said, we have 20 locals across the state from all parts of the state. Some of them smaller, some suburban, some more rural, but we don't have the very, very northern part of the state reflected yet in our group, and that's something we're really trying to do. Cat Stevens, what is the first step? Do decisions the committee makes then have to go to the school board? Anyone want to take that on?
David, I'll say, you can have school districts that support the idea of community schools and some that don't. And if your district administration doesn't support it, then I would go directly to a school board meeting, to your report time, your local association report time, and lay out what you want to do directly before the board. If you have a board and a local administration that is not agreeable to this, then you start building it yourself with the parents, with the students, with the community groups. And part of the requirements coming forward for the grant applications is going to be having a team like you would be putting together to work with the district on all of the decision making. So it's really going to be a real pressure on the district to accept these groups coming in and being part of this process to have access to that money.
I got a question from DCB about what is the application process. I think for this purposes of today, we're really trying to get people to come to the forum on the 19th, where we'll really specifically go over that. Question for Grant. Actually, here's a question from Michael Bloom from FSUTA. What about in the environment of a conservative school board in a centralized district? How does one ignite the urge and need to rebuild districts in the community model? Anyone want to take that on? Ingrid? Yeah.
I mean, I would say that even in a conservative district, the idea, right, that each school should serve its community is enticing. All of our schools shouldn't be cookie cutter models, right? Because our communities are so different. And so just the fact that you're responding to stakeholder needs is the key. It doesn't matter whether the community is progressive or conservative, but what are the needs of that community and how can we center the school as the hub of that community so that the stakeholder gets what they need? I think that's the key.
A question from Steve Campos. How much control or say will outside groups or nonprofits that are on campuses in our community schools? Will they supersede our stakeholder control or the parents' community control? How have you safeguarded against that? That's often a model where districts kind of, take a cookie cutter and this group says, we'll do this, we'll do your needs assessment for you, we'll do all this for you, and then we're going to run our community schools, we'll put our staff at your school. How have you kind of carved out a space to make sure this is really run by people at the school sites? Anyone?
Well, I can start off and maybe folks can jump in, but one of the things that I think is really key to this is having the steering committee and the steering committee having sort of control over the implementation, and just having that agreement up front about how things are going to be designed on a site level. And so it is sort of a agreement that has to happen district-wide to ensure that sites are able to determine who get to make those kind of decisions. And I don't know if Ingrid wants to add on, because I know she's got a lot of experience with that.
I just wanted to say at the school site level, we invite our partners to be part of the work, but we absolutely let them know that this is something that all of the stakeholders drive. There's no, it's collaborative leadership, right? And we acknowledge and appreciate the partnerships and we recognize them, but no one's there to give anyone else the power, right? The community has the power. And so we make that very clear at the school site whenever a partner or nonprofit wants to partner up.
The other thing, just on that question, the other thing about this is why being a union is also an important part of this. Unions have actually bargained and made clear this process. For example, you don't just go by faith that the district is going to say we co-chair it. No, it actually carved out a process around community schools is going to be co-chaired by the education union and the district. And they each get to pick 5 other people to be on that. That's the case, for example, in LA. Interestingly, of the 6 people that UTLA had to appoint, 2 of them were UTLA members. The other people were part of the community as well. And so it's really to the other people's questions too. That when you organize with the community, it's about a different kind of power. And even in conservative districts, that kind of power, which you often don't use, is a way that's much stronger than some of the top-down, even conservative instincts of the district. If you have that kind of power and bring it into even the bargaining sphere. Couple questions by Harold and Karen. Will it be recorded on the 19th? Yes, we will record the 19th and we'll make that available as well for the regs. From Jessica Downs, how often do you meet with stakeholders and is it volunteer?
I'll take that real quick. We meet monthly as a steering committee, and then each individual site committee also meets monthly. We did have the grant through NEA for Safe and Just Schools that we did provide small stipends to the community leaders, the parents that were on the steering committee, and a few on the site committees as well. So there was some availability of funds there for this year while we got it started up. And then it'll all depend on the grant money coming forward. If you're a school of over 2,000 students, you qualify for a $500,000 implementation grant that runs for 5 years. And with the district, you decide how you want all of that money spent, and if there is some money available for people's time when they're working on this process.
And I'll just add that in Oakland, we meet twice monthly in our task force. And for us, our folks on the task force are volunteer, and they are not yet compensated, but it is something that we want to move toward because we do believe that people's time needs to be compensated. But we are lucky that we have so many dedicated folks that have been showing up from the community, sharing their brilliance.
Another thing, just to Grant's point too, with this community schools funding, we're envisioning that a lion's share of the grant is actually going to go to pay to release one of our members at a school site to be the community schools coordinator. That way, that work is not volunteer. It is actually part of their everyday work, as it is for Ingrid. This is her job. A longtime educator, decades in the classroom. Now those connections with her school and the community are being in this role as a community schools coordinator. That's where we're proposing that a lot of this money goes to actually make it so it honors our labor, and it also creates a sustainable model with someone at a school site to make this happen. I think we're almost getting, wow, lots of great questions. I think we're almost running out of time. Let's take a few more, and then Toby, you give me when it's time to stop talking, give us the hook. From Linda Valdez, it requires a great deal of trust from the district in their teachers, parents, staff, etc. Have you found pushback from some districts? The demographics and socioeconomic levels seem to be a significant factor in communities rallying around the development of community schools. How do you deal with pushback? How do you deal with this power over that we so often feel from districts?
We went on strike. Sorry, we had to go on strike to get buy-in, right, from the district. But the strike proved to be correct. And I think for a long time, districts and unions have seen each other as adversaries, right? And no one thinks we can work together when the interest is the same. The district claims that they care about students, and the union absolutely has always cared about students. And so there's this great opportunity for both the union and the district to work collaboratively on something that they each care about or they claim to care about. So in Los Angeles, we said, show us, right? Like, show us your commitment to the community and the students. And sometimes you have to do that.
And I'll say we did just something small that has really paid big dividends, and that is the group of all of the different stakeholders meeting together monthly. We do it on the back end of lunch, and we sit and have an hour-long lunch together and just talk socially and build relationships with each other and start to build the trust. One of the first meetings I went to regarding community schools, the quote has always stayed with me, that progress will travel at the speed of trust. And if people don't trust, we're not going to get anywhere. And so we've got to build those relationships. That's why it's so important not to have any outside groups come in to take over any part of the process or any part of the service delivery, that everything needs to be together, decided together, and brought forward together, and then have all the resulting services or educational program changes made with the input of everyone. And I know we're getting close to the end. So the one last thing I wanted to mention is that organizing, that doing this it's such a great program, but we're also building a level of organizing that we've always wanted to have in our locals, but that we didn't always have the time or the resources to create, and down to the individual sites. This is going to build relationships and coalitions that are going to aid us in any sort of fight for public education as we go forward. So it's really important, and it's really been a blessing for our association to be part of this.
And the thing I'll add about the way we approached this, because of course OUSD, this was their claim to fame and complete control. And so as we started showing interest in changing the model, there was some significant pushback. And at exactly what Grant just said, we began the process of organizing, talking, and doing some deep listening to our families, students, and educators. And then because we're organizing around people's issues, what is it that you want to see in schools? That's what gave us the power, the people power, to be able to actually change the board. And we had a privatizing board, a board that really wasn't invested in the community schools model. But once we were able to organize with the community and change our school board, we had school board members, again, like Van Cedric Williams, who was able to take this vision and change what was possible for us in OUSD. So, it really has taken quite some years, right? It's been over a course of years. UTLA had to strike. We've had to really galvanize a certain amount of support for these resolutions. It has been an amazing process of really building trust and demonstrating through our actions that we're here with the community.
Hey, David?
Yeah, I see Toby here, so let me just
Why don't we wrap it up?
and do, first of all, thank all of our amazing folks on this panel. And I guess I'll answer, there's a few more questions. I'll try to answer them all in one time. So if this is the 19th, if you want to know more about, if your president specifically wants to know more about this, please hit them up to come on the 19th. I think we put it in the chat here, to look for emails from Toby twice in the last week. That's really, to Hillary's question, that's really a meeting for us and our member leaders. I think we'll have other meetings. I would not bring your school board member, even if they are supportive, to that particular meeting. We'll have follow-up meetings definitely, or we'll figure out how to get them information as well. To Charles Jones's questions, or to Thomas's question, this money is not going, the associations do not apply. This is still, the state is still following, again, part of this top-down model. This is why it's going to be so important for us to carve out space on the ground to make this happen. It is LEAs and districts who apply. We're going to have to really fight to get in there, and that's going to take a lot of these strategies that we're talking about. Charles Jones asked, how do we do that? How do we actually make that happen? There's some infrastructure, there's some stuff on our website. Please reach out to myself, dgoldberg@cta.org. If any of these folks want to put their information in the chat, you can reach out to them directly too with questions. If you want to be part of the Institute, if this is a real commitment your district wants to make, you'll have coaching through this process. It's a kind of multi-year process of really supporting this along the way. None of this stuff happens overnight, but it is an incredible process, and it is the schools and communities we deserve. So we'll survive this pandemic, and at the same time, we'll continue to struggle for the schools and the world that we all deserve. Thank you, panelists. Thank you very much. And we will thank you for your time and for being here and for all your great messages.